Welcome, Temple University Japan campus. I'm extremely happy to welcome you to our new facilities. And I'd like to thank all our panelists, and first and foremost, Annette, who's also an adjunct fellow at ICAS, for organizing this. So thank you very much. My only job here as the butler of this organization is to tell you that in case there's an earthquake, not familiar with Japan, it's actually better to stay inside because things can fall, so go under your chairs. And then afterwards, if the earthquake has stopped, it may actually be more effective to evacuate because we have a space that on the other side, which is safe from falling objects. But if there's a quake, just go under your seat. Just don't start rushing around because things can fall. Also, if you have a phone, put it on vibrate or mute or turn it off. And also, we gave you a questionnaire about the event. So fill it after the event, because if you fill it before, it's hard for you to have an opinion about it. Anything else I should, anything else we need? No, nothing. Okay, so thanks again. Brevity is the soul of wit, so I'm done with my introduction. So now the floor goes to Dr. Bradford. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's my turn to say welcome now. I'm just going to speak for 1 minute and say today we have 3 wonderful women who research about women in Japanese academia. As you know, Japan doesn't do too well when it comes to gender balance in many areas. The Japanese government has set a goal for to raise the number of female academics to 30% by 2020. We currently stand at nearly 25%, I think. These ladies will tell you more about that. So I'm going to hand it over, first of all, to Jennifer Yphantides.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Yphantides, and I work at Soka University in Hachioji. I'm going to speak a little bit tonight about my doctoral research, which I completed in March. My topic was the career trajectories of foreign women that work in TESOL in Japan. So a little bit of background why I chose this topic. When I first arrived in Japan, I already had a lot of experience teaching English around the world. And the first thing I noticed was that there was a really big gender imbalance. TESOL traditionally has a lot of women. The ratio is about 70 to 30% in most countries in Europe and all over North America. But once you come to Asia, you notice a discrepancy. And I wondered a little bit about why that was. And there is some literature out there that discusses that. But then I thought more that I want to look at women who have actually made it here, because women do drop out, they leave. So I wonder, why do they stay? The women that have achieved success, why do they stay and how do they succeed? I started looking for literature about that, and there was nothing. There was nothing that traced career trajectories of foreign women that have made it in Japan. So because there wasn't literature, I looked at a global body of literature, and I didn't just look at TESOL. I looked at women who are leaders in higher education in formal positions like deans, provosts, and presidents. In this global body of literature, Japan was not included. I could only find one study at the time of my literature review that partially included Japan. So because I wanted to ground my research in my own context and in my own experience, I wanted to use the framework of intersectionality. Because in Japan, I'm very aware of being a female, but I'm also very aware of being a foreigner, right? So I thought that that would be a good framework so that I could look at this from multiple angles. And the literature that I looked at often talked about problems and solutions. But with intersectionality, I thought that I could dig further than the problems and the solutions and get more into the details of the women's lives. A lot of the literature is statistically based. And I wanted to do a narrative study that dug deeply into the lives and career trajectories of some successful women here in Japan. I had 3 key findings, like threads that united my participants together. The first one was chance. A lot of the women that I interviewed accidentally arrived in Japan. They followed boyfriends, they followed husbands. They came here because they saw a random ad in the newspaper or were suddenly offered a position. And once they arrived here, they made random progression. A lot of them just were offered position to position and kind of moved up a little bit like that at the beginning of their careers. And their careers were also punctuated by a variety of interruptions that I think are quite specific to women that I saw in my literature that I looked at for the review. Those interruptions included marriage, taking time off for further education, because a lot of women, when they start their career in higher ed, don't have PhDs yet. Interruptions for maternity leave and childcare, and interruptions for caring for aging parents. Usually, employers see this as a really negative thing. I didn't. I started to think about the career interruptions that I'd had. And I started to think, what is getting me past those? And I wanted to look at women and to see what exactly worked for them. Well, at the beginning of their careers in this chance, a lot of their personal characteristics, for example, their inquisitiveness, their ability to be really social, their ability to work hard and be determined, and their skills at networking were very useful in helping them escape what's called the sticky floor in the literature. They're stuck to this floor of contingent work and part-time positions. So they were able to harness their personal characteristics and their networking skills to escape this sticky floor, and also to be able to successfully combine work and family by leaning on their colleagues and their bosses to help support them. The second thread finding was that the women really made a massive effort mid-career to build themselves up. What did they do? Most of them went back to school for PhDs while they're working full-time, or master's degrees. That required some of them to take a lot of time off in summers, for example. They had to really sacrifice a lot in order to study. They had to get babysitters for their kids. It was a rough time for them, and yet they persevered, and they got that master's degree and they got that PhD to move forward. During the building, one theme that came up was being foreign. So a lot of people think that's a negative in Japan, and I think in some cases it is. But for my participants, they didn't see it that way at all. Because they were white, because they were from inner circle countries, because they were native speakers of English, they were able to harness that power in Japan for good and to push themselves forward a little bit. They often said that they felt that being foreign trumped their being female. That being said, all of their participants were able to tell me a story or two about how they were passed over for tenured positions, how they struggled to take care of kids at the same time as they were working, how their husbands who worked in the same field and had less qualifications were paid more, etc. And still, despite some of these challenges, the women were able to focus on their support systems and build support systems to get through this. So I started to think about my own nonlinear career trajectory, something that I've often considered to be a negative mark on my career. And now I see that it was actually leadership development on the job. And that what the breaks that I've taken and the studies that I've done have actually been able to push me forward. And they were also able to make me be a more sympathetic educator to my students and a more sympathetic colleague to the people that I work with. I was able to really take a deeper look at how I've benefited and been privileged as a white person from Canada in this environment, and to see that the experiences, the quite negative experiences I felt that I had with gender, may not have always been just about gender. That's partly so, but it wasn't the whole picture. And I also thought, about mentorship. I have had a lot of mentors. Some of the mentors that I've had are sitting in this room, but that I didn't actually seek them out. They sought me out, and they were able to help me. But I think we need, as women and men, to look for mentorship experiences and possibilities in the workplace. The final theme is success. A lot of times we think about leadership as an official title or an official role. But the women, when I traced their trajectories, what I saw is they were kind of leaders from the beginning. Even though they were contingent or part-time, they were leaders in what they were doing because they were always thinking of what's going to happen next and how can they fit into that, or how they can create a space for themselves. They were really making their own roles before they were given a formal leadership position. And once they got those formal leadership positions, one thing that I saw in the interviews common to all of the participants was that they were actively paying back. And that payback included helping women take maternity leave, helping them reintegrate into the workforce after maternity leave, making sure that women are selected for interview positions when some of the male colleagues have sort of passed them up, making sure that visible minorities are included on lists for interviews, etc. Okay, and finally, I'd like to say that my kind of picture of success in the workplace changed. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's an actual title. I think that when I look at the women I interviewed, I would define their success as their ability to make an inclusive environment and to focus on inclusion in the workplace. Reiko is going to speak soon about contingent positions and how difficult they are. And I think that women that are in leadership roles really need to focus on trying to include everyone and using their emotional intelligence to recognize that the neoliberal workplace that we're living in right now is so competitive, and we forget about our emotional intelligence and how we need to use that and how we need to focus less on specific academics and more on developing a culture of service for our students. Finally, I'd just like to conclude by saying that we, in organizations, I think, need to improve our professional development programs, because I've worked in Japan for 15 years and I've never had a formal mentor. People that are not necessarily so active in the workplace because they feel held back by certain things need to have official mentor programs that can help them get started. We need to push more for diversity inclusion. It's lip service. Internationalization is lip service. We need to get feedback from the people that are the so-called diverse students at the school and the so-called representatives of inclusion to find out what's really going on with them. And we need to focus more on research that's connected to pastoral care of students. I'd just like to conclude by saying that it seems bleak. A lot of the literature seems really bleak. But when I look around this room, I think there's presence here. Annette and I go way back, and I want to thank her for the opportunity of letting me speak today and giving me a platform. The last time I saw Kristie, it was because she invited me to speak with her on a platform about gender. I don't know Reiko, I just met her now, but she was the kind of mentor because I read her PhD thesis when I was preparing mine. There's Maria in the back, a friend of mine, who was my third reader, my external reader, and very supportive as a mentor. And I really appreciated that. There's Kimmy that I worked with, and I see Jenny and Carolyn. I really appreciate these women and what they've meant to me in my career. So thank you.
All right, thanks for starting us off, Jennifer. That was really great. My name is Christy Collins, and I'm at Reitaku University in Kashiwa over in Chiba-ken. And first, I would like to say thank you to Annette for organizing this panel tonight. I think it's really important, and I'm delighted to be here on it. And thank you to Temple for having us here for this event. It's a remarkable new campus, and you can smell new building smell. It's quite wonderful. Now, the presentation I'm doing today it's very much my personal experience with trying to get tenure, which took almost 18 years of full-time work. Yeah. So I finally got it last year. Yay. And thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So this presentation is based on a book chapter that is coming out next year, and there will be a bit of information about that at the end of the presentation. So it's Waiting with Bated Breath, My Journey to Securing Tenure. My area of research and my teaching is in gender studies and gender in media and female singleness in particular. And I'm currently also the head of department of the English and Liberal Arts Studies at Reitaku in the Faculty of Foreign Studies. But I will happily be passing the torch to the next administrator in April. So today's talk, what I would like to do is give you a brief background on me and where I come from and what took so long to get to tenure, or at least what I believe may be the factors. And the two main factors that we're going to talk about is the foreign factor and the female factor. These are two things that I'm sure a lot of us can relate to if you fit that profile. And then if there are people who are still, like I was for so long, looking for a permanent position, I'm going to try to share some tips that might help. So, different times. I had to remember to do this on both. There we go. Different times. I went to my first PhD graduation when I was 3 months old. So I am that little blob. I think I look pretty much the same, though. And so I was 3 months old when my father got his PhD in business administration from the University of Massachusetts in the US. My brother is actually advertising with his sweatshirt there. And my father ended up going to Prince Edward Island, which is where my mother's family is originally from. That's where I grew up. And had a wonderful career, about 35 years teaching at UPEI. And he was a full professor and a dean. So my insider perspective as a kid growing up in academia was, this is great. You know, like I lived up the street from campus. We had international students over for Thanksgiving dinner every year. We went on sabbatical in Europe, and it seemed like a really cool way to live. But I didn't actually plan to do that. I didn't plan to be an academic or a teacher until I came to Japan in 1996 on the JET program. My first degree is actually in theater, and so I wanted to come here and get money to open a theater, but then I realized that teaching is having a captive audience every day, so that was good. So I decided that I would get my master's degree and pursue teaching at the university level, but teaching in a language center. So comparing my experience to my father's experience, and having seen this as I was growing up, in 1974, when my father got his degree, it was basically a situation where industry leaders and universities would come to campus and headhunt new PhDs. Can you imagine? Like, there was no job hunting, they came to you. And so you graduate, you walk out, and they offer you jobs. So Dad got a job immediately, a tenure stream position. He had never taught in his life. His first lecture, he had a big script and he read it all. So at that point, the deal was you basically get a tenure stream job, and then you aim for probably balancing the three, excelling at two: teaching excellence, scholarly research, community service. Made sense. I still think it makes sense. I still think this is what we need to be doing. However, my own experience showed me the good old days are gone. It is no longer so easy as getting your PhD and doing those three things. Yeah, it's really not. So it took me over 15 years of teaching in full-time contracts at the university level, holding a PhD, publishing a book and dozens of articles, chapters, academic presentations around the world, a massive institutional exchange partnership between my Japanese university and my dad's Canadian university. And even with all of that, 5 years of hunting for jobs, wasn't even getting an interview. It was brutal. So finally, in 2017, Reitaku University, where I am at now, interviewed me and gave me a job. Yeah. And I finally got that tenure stream job in my 16th year of full-time teaching. Tenure stream. And so very fortunately for me, they saw in the first 5 months, she's a keeper. Let's fast track her and give her tenure now and offer her the head of department job, which I wish I could have just taken the tenure and not the head of department job, but it's a good learning experience. So when I was approached by the editors of the book that I'm publishing this chapter in to talk about this long journey to finally getting my tenure, I decided to think about, what are some common threads that foreign female academics in Japan are experiencing? Why is it that so many of us are struggling to be able to secure a permanent position? And I thought it's really not those first three things. All of us are doing things with research, with great teaching, and with providing community service. But in fact, I would say that the two things are, being non-Japanese here. So this is, as Jennifer said, it's for better and worse. There's great things. We have positive discrimination as well as foreign faculty, but there's also some things that keep us in an outsider position. And the other thing is my female identity. And I like this picture. I thought it's like being a foreign female academic at some of the conferences where you're looking to find another one in the crowd. So this presentation, I'm going to just talk about these two things and tell you a bit about what is out there in research on this stuff. Oh, thanks. I like that little origami one too. Okay, so the foreign factor, this is a quote from Burton, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it or thought about this idea of the revolving door for foreign staff who usually get 5 years or less contracts so that we're not obligated, or the universities are not obligated to keep us. So I'm just going to read here from my notes because I don't want to forget anything. Being a foreign academic in Japan is truly a double-edged sword. On the one hand, being non-Japanese automatically qualifies someone for certain advertised positions that seek out instructors hailing from foreign countries. In addition to this, it seems a person's chances improve exponentially if they are a native English speaker, and may even skyrocket if they are male, Caucasian, and under the age of 40. In a 2017 study on the push and pull factors that influence international faculty in Japan, Huang found that despite increased proportions of foreign faculty in Japanese universities, there was no remarkable growth in the proportion of international faculty who were hired as institutional leaders, neither was there any striking rise in the proportion of female international faculty. So I think that's important, that there may seem to be more foreign faculty arriving, but not in positions where they have the opportunity to change the system, and most of them are contract male faculty. And then also with Huang, considering that Huang also noted that as of 2016, full-time international faculty made up less than 5% of the full-time post-secondary Japanese workforce, and that male international faculty outnumber female international faculty by nearly 4 to 1. It is quite apparent that the foreign faculty presence in Japan is still very small, and especially so for foreign female faculty members. So less than 5% international permanent faculty, 4 to 1, meaning less than 2% for foreign female. Okay. And yet, internationalization and globalization remain hot topics for Japanese universities, and these terms are firmly entrenched in post-secondary PR jargon. One only need to skim through some of the initiative titles of the top global University Japan institutions to see how strongly these terms resonate, with such colorful examples as we can see here. So I highlighted all the global, and worldwide. I think my favorite, I like the Toyo Global Diamonds, but I think Waseda Goes Global, a plan to build a worldwide academic network that is open, dynamic, and diverse. That's a mouthful. So these things are obviously ways that they're trying to attract more students. So accordingly, all Japanese universities seem duty-bound to offer prospective students a global campus, ready access to cross-cultural communication with international students and faculty, and myriad opportunities for study abroad and homestay programs. For many foreign faculty members, this focus on international activity presents the opportunity to shine. And as Japan's population dwindles and its universities battle for survival, we can only wait and see if our foreignness stock will rise in this period of educational upheaval. In truth, the number of Japanese post-secondary institutions is already unsustainable. So universities are now scrambling to reorganize and rebrand their programs in order to attract both Japanese and international students. These efforts can be seen in the promotion of global campuses and in the popularity of educational recruitment events targeted at Japanese high school students, such as Yume Navi. Do you guys know Yume Navi? It's like this huge program, and there's YouTube videos and then big events at spaces like the Tokyo Big Site, where high school students go and learn about different university students. And I went in 2018 to represent my university. And you have the opportunity to reach thousands of prospective students over the course of the day. So if a university is able to bring some bright and entertaining foreign faculty, then they can stand out, and this might be a way of attracting our shrinking population of high school students. So while departments and programs restructure, there may indeed be potential for international faculty to take on larger roles in the way post-secondary education is designed and delivered in Japan. So going over to the female factor, while being a foreign academic has its advantages and disadvantages in Japan, being a female academic has long been perceived overwhelmingly to be a handicap. As noted in the quote above, the percentage of female researchers in Japanese research-intensive universities barely surpasses the 10% mark. So this is from 2014. This is Stephanie Assman, who's up at Hokudai. She does great work. So two significant reasons which account for the difficulties faced by women in Japanese academia can be linked to long-held conceptions of the expert being constructed as male, think manager, think male kind of thinking, and with the continued social expectation that women should shoulder the lion's share of domestic work and childcare. The notion in Japan that scholarship has traditionally been seen as the domain of men can be traced through the decline of female educators in each stage of education, from primary through post-secondary. So as Assman observes on the scarcity of female Japanese teachers in higher education, while 62% of elementary school teachers are female, 62%, only 30.3% of teachers at high schools are female, and 19.5% of university faculties consist of female lecturers, associate, or full professors. So, going back to Huang's research, and this is looking at international faculty by gender and sector. So to recap, okay, I'm throwing a lot of data and numbers at you. So to recap, Assman found the Japanese female academics hold less than 20% of university faculty positions in Japan. And then also only 12.7% of research positions. Revisiting Huang's study, we can see that of the 5% of international academics working in Japan who have succeeded in securing full-time posts, foreign male faculty outnumber foreign female faculty nearly 4-to-1, leaving foreign female academics holding less than 2% of permanent posts in Japanese universities. Less than 2%. We are a rare find. In my own case, I will say that I found my gender to be somewhat less problematic in my career development than I have my foreign non-Japanese identity. In a sense, it has always seemed that my foreignness, as Jennifer said, trumped my femaleness, leaving me to position myself just as sort of foreign scholar, and I was kind of gender-free. And as for how my gender has seemed like less of an impediment in my journey to tenure, the reason perhaps may lie in my being child-free and unmarried. So this excuses me from many of the life-work balance challenges facing my married with children and single-parent female colleagues. However, I cannot help but think that my gender could have played a part in not securing interviews in my first few years of job hunting, as I was way qualified, but probably lacked just the connections in universities. And so perhaps the applicants who were invited to interview and the ones who eventually were offered the job, maybe they had informal recommendations from their mates in the department. Who knows? I don't know, but could be. So, as I promised, some insider tips. Very, very important, because honestly, if I did it again, I don't know if I would do it. If I actually went back, I don't know. Would I have come to Japan? Would I have done my PhD? I don't know. Now that I have it, I'm awfully glad I did. But I don't know if I could honestly say to a undergraduate who was looking to get her PhD in literature that this is necessarily a good move. You know, make sure that there's something at the end of it, because it's a very, very competitive field right now. But if you're determined to do it, here are my tips. Find mentors who will champion you, because you will need them. You need people who will go to bat for you, because there's battles between departments on who gets the budget to be able to hire people. You need people in your corner. Get active in professional development circles, because just like I said in the last slide with, you know, if you have the connections who can maybe say, no, make sure you interview her. This is your way in. A lot of it is word of mouth, so get out and network. Make an effort to learn Japanese, which I wish I had done more of. Especially when you do get into a position of leadership and on committees as a tenured member, you have a lot of reading to do, a lot of paperwork, and a lot of committees in Japanese. So I would recommend it. And finally, devote time to self-care. Be good to yourself, be kind to yourself. It took a toll on me, like my physical health, my emotional health. I dealt with anxiety, I dealt with depression, I dealt with imposter syndrome. It was really hard. And so be kind to yourself, lean on your friends. There's people who are going through it with you, so don't be too proud to lean on your friends. And because it was waiting with bated breath, don't forget to breathe. Yeah. Okay, so finally I'll just say, dun, 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 in 2020, coming soon to a bookstore near you, Women in Japanese Academia, Voices of Foreign Female University Teachers, coming out from Candlin and Minard. Some of the chapters you can see here, it's going to be an amazing, amazing collection. Jennifer and I both have stuff in this book. And so I think it's going to be a really valuable resource to people like yourselves who are interested in this field. If you want to know any information on the research that I quoted, I'm happy to share this with you after. And this is a picture from the Canadian Embassy, where they had a great event on women and leadership at the Canadian Embassy, and it was a whole auditorium full of women. And you just don't see that much. So I thought that was an appropriate ending for us today. So thank you for your time and attention, and I'll be glad to speak with you more in Q&A.
Okay, so I'm Reiko Yoshihara, and I thank you for inviting me to this event, and I'm very happy to be part of it. And today, I'd like to talk about how neoliberal context, university context, and Japanese cultural gender ideology influenced professional life over Japanese female part-time instructor. And before that, I just briefly talk about neoliberalism and the Japanese university. And neoliberalism has kept into step with globalization, with competitiveness and individualism since the 1970s. And the new class of precariat was born. And according to the British economist Guy Standing, defined the precariat as a people who lack labor-related security in terms of labor market, employment, job, work, skill reproduction, income, and representation. And as a result, the precariat feel anger, anomie, anxiety, alienation, which is called precariousized mind. And the wave of neoliberalism extended to the higher education. And for example, raising the tuition, entering into research partnership with industry, and hiring limited term contract instructors and a large number of part-time instructors. And Japanese universities are no exception to this trend. Okay, and this is one example. This is a ratio of part-timers to full-timers in Japanese university. This is 学校調査 school basic data provided by MEXT. And look at 2016. Over half of university instructors are part-timers. And also, I want to refer what is happening in Japanese university. In 1996, under the name of Teacher Mobility and Young Scholar Development, MEXT, as you know, MEXT, Ministry of Education, encouraged the university to introduce the contract instructor system. And as a result, a number of full-time, limited term contract instructors appeared. And also in 2013, under the revision of labor contract law, any workers who worked for more than 5 years can get a permanent status. And the statement looks really good, you know, but actually what is happening is that university give part-time instructors a 5-year or 10-year maximum contract with no renewable possible afterwards. And I just single out one case from my previous study and explain today's topic through Naomi's narrative. And the article about my previous study is already published. So if you are interested in it, you know, please take a look. And Naomi is a mid-30 part-time university instructor in Japan with an 8-year teaching experience when I first interviewed. Okay. And I will explain about Naomi's precarious situation, and she expressed discontent and discouragement because of lack of research funding. And she said that year the graduate colloquium was held at the Osaka campus, not Tokyo campus. I wanted to go, but I couldn't afford it. At that time, she was a PhD program, she attended in a PhD program while she was working part-time. And also, she said, I usually borrow books from a university library. I don't buy them. So definitely, lack of the research funding influenced her research and also motivation to research and also, you know, research production. And because of she had no choice about teaching classes, she felt discontent. And she said, I think part-time university teachers are often asked to teach repeaters English classes. If we were asked to teach many of these classes, we would get tired of teaching and feel very discouraged. And as a tenured faculty, I am teaching repeaters classes. And to be honest, you know, I don't like teaching repeaters class, you know, and I'm not happy about that. But the big difference between her situation and my situation is I can avoid teaching these classes. But if she refused to teach, she might risk losing teaching classes, which leads to her income insecurity. And also, fewer tenure track positions made her feel very worried about the future. And also, she said, you know, I failed so many times. I thought I wouldn't be suitable as a teacher. When I talked to one teacher who got a tenured position, he said, it's very usual. I sent my CV to about 100 universities. Would I have to send my CV to hundreds of universities like him? How long would it take for me to get a tenured position? So repeated failure to get a tenured position made her feel anxious about her future and even despaired of her future. And also, she desired to marry, and every time I interviewed, she said she wanted to marry. And she said, during the research period, she left teaching once and worked in a research institute for 1 year. And at that time, I asked her why she left teaching. And she first noted job insecurity. But she said, after that, she said, if I had married and had a child, I might have continued to teach English as a part-time university instructor. And 1 year later, she returned to the part-time teaching position again. And at that time, she said, if I got a tenured position, I don't think there would be a desperate feeling to get married like now. And although the number of full-time housewives is decreasing in Japan, but a gender ideology in which a man is a breadwinner and woman is a secondary wage earner is deeply rooted in Japan. And in Japan, marriage guarantees women's status and gives them societal credit. It is still, you know. So, and also her student gender discourse influenced student gender discourse reinforced her gender identity. And I want to introduce the interesting conversation between her, Naomi and her student. She said, it was almost 5 years ago, I was asked by a student, how old are you? Are you married? And when I told him my age, he said, yake. And I said, you know, something like, you're old maid or you are already over 30? And Naomi said, yes. He said, almost 30 years ago, it's undesirable. And the conversation, I mean, actually, you know, the asking age or asking marital status is pretty common in Japan, you know. But the students have a different judgment based on gender differences. And the conversation between Naomi and her student illustrate how male-centered way of looking at society forms women's subjugated experience. And also, this evidenced that power is everywhere. Power doesn't operate only in a macro top-down fashion. Power circulates in a micro power relation in a society. And in a conclusion, so neoliberal university context and Japanese culture gender ideology definitely influence Naomi's teaching and researching and her professional life. Okay, that's all about it. Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you very much. And can I have the clicker one? We need a couple more of these, don't we? Before we turn it over to question and answers, discussion time, I'd like to point out 2 books that you might find interesting if you want to read more about this topic. The first one will be out in November this year, and the second one is a book from 2017. Not specifically about Japan, but both of them have chapters written by female academics in Japan in them. So I've not looked at them yet, but they're on my list to buy as a follow-up to this. I'd like to say thank you very much to all of our panelists. And I didn't say at the beginning, but as it became clear during the talk, these are three very accomplished women who have tenured or tenure-track jobs here. So, as Kristie said, a pretty rare find. And I'd like to thank Reiko especially for highlighting the precarious situation of Japanese females as well. I don't want people to go away from this thinking, oh, we're just talking about foreign women here. We're also talking about Japanese female professors. I'm going to sort of jump in first with the first question I thought I had here. It's really interesting. I thought that dialogue with the student asking the teacher's age and, oh, you're way too old, you're not married yet. Speaking to everybody in the room, I wonder if you've had the same experiences. I find being a foreign professor, my students don't seem to think that of me. The kind of babies and marriage stuff. I'm married, don't have children, and they seem to accept that. Oh, it's okay, she's foreign, she doesn't have children. I feel, for me, I feel the foreign thing is actually affects my career perhaps more. Probably from the student's point of view. I've just given up a job, a full-time contract job, because I wasn't happy with the terms of my job, just didn't enjoy working there anymore. And the comments I got from my students were, oh, you're going back to your home country. Like, no, this is where I live. I'm just changing jobs. But overwhelmingly, I get there, oh, you're going back to your home country. So I feel the foreignness and that we're supposed to be here just for a short term kind of affects life more than being a female. It's not really a question there, it's just a, you know, if anybody, when we go over to question and answers, wants to sort of follow up on that, I'd be really happy to hear your opinions. Okay, so I'm going to hand this back to our speakers, and please raise your hand, go to the microphone at the back of the room. Please be aware you are being recorded when you ask these questions. And please, I'd like to hear any questions.
Hello. I can speak loudly. Thank you for your time this evening. That was a very insightful panel. I'm just short. I apologize for being first. I actually have two questions, if you don't mind. This is for the entire panel. Because the opportunities are so limited for Japanese women in Japan already, and in addition to that, foreign females, I was wondering if you could describe the competition that you had to deal with. Was it with each other as foreign females? Was it a combination of all? Did you feel like whether you had to compete with your male foreign counterparts as well? And for my second question, for the successful foreign female academics, could you share the demographics of them? You, Ms. Yphantides and Ms. Collins, you both described that your foreign characteristics was more prevalent than your gender. And I was curious if you saw that certain nationalities were prevalent for those who were successful. Thank you.
Okay. So your first question was about competition. You know, I got to exhale this year. Let me choose my words really carefully. There are a few women in the room now who I was in direct competition with for tenured positions, and I remember that feeling really well, and it wasn't a good place to be in. And I seriously considered leaving this field. And I thought that, you know, about a year and a half ago, I was denied tenure in favor of a less qualified male applicant. And it wasn't just because I was denied tenure, it was because of feeling precarious for such a long period of time that I thought to myself, do I really, really want to do this? And I came to the conclusion that I did, but I didn't find any job. And then suddenly, I was called up by Soka University and offered a tenure-track position that had actually been awarded to another person. And I felt every day since then grateful to go to work. Now, I think women often feel really grateful to go to work, but I'm asking myself, don't I have more value than that? Doesn't Naomi have more value than that? Like, do we really have to feel super grateful to go to work and to constantly tell ourselves, I'm so glad that I'm here that I'm going to ignore all the bad things that happened to me and all the slights as a foreigner and as a woman? Yeah, I feel like I'm sailing every day on that tenure track position that dropped into my lap by chance a year and a half ago. And I think that this trend, not just in higher ed, but the trend towards precariousness and the gig economy is a very dangerous one, a very stressful one, and I felt that personally. Your second question was about prevalence. I wrote down prevalence. I can't remember what else you said, though.
Whether you found for those who were able to succeed in this field, whether they hailed from certain nationalities or others.
Yeah, sure, right. So, yeah, you're looking at men who are white, who are native speakers from inner circle countries. They're the majority, definitely. And I would say that in my own personal experience, I had more gender discrimination, I faced more gender discrimination from them than from my Japanese male colleagues, I'd have to say.
It is on. Okay, thank you for your question. I can say both of those questions resonate with me. First, when I was applying for jobs in 2016 for the upcoming 2017 April start, my boss, the dean of the graduate school, who was writing references for me, was applying to the same positions, and my PhD students that I was helping complete their theses were also applying to the same positions. So that puts you in a very, very strange position that your referee may be interviewed before you, and your student that you wrote a letter reference for could be interviewing after you. So it's just felt at so many different levels right now that the precariousness is rampant. And so anybody, that also creates a situation where you feel like it's so dire you have to hang on no matter how bleak the position may be, which is not healthy. And then in terms of women that are in the the job hunting pool right now, I do feel that I've had an edge being perceived as a white woman from Canada who is a native English speaker, and it drives me bonkers that one of my best friends who is Filipina, are you okay? And she's perceived as being a non-native speaking applicant. And it's insane because actually she just has more languages to offer than me. Her English is fluent. And so I do think that there is this very unfair tendency to just say, you're from these specific countries we recognize as native English speaking countries, and she may have to leave because she's been trying to secure a position for 4 years now, and nobody's biting. And she has 2 CACAN grants right now, and still nobody will give her a job. It's insane. So yeah, that's what I have experienced myself. How about you, Reiko?
Okay. So it's very competitive. It's very competitive. And I heard. It's not my university, but I heard from scholarly friends that there is only one position, and there are 108 applicants. So it's very competitive, and the tenure as a professor assumes that tenure, if you want to get a tenure as a position, they should have, PhD and a lot of publication and teaching experience. So it's very competitive, and I don't deny that there is some discrimination or based on gender differences in Japanese academia. And just remember the last year, there is an inappropriate treatment based on gender differences in the examination of medical school. And I was very shocked, and I assumed that entrance examination was fair, but it wasn't. And that same thing happened in a university too. And I support, kind of, I don't know if it's a solution or not, but we should support positive action for gender equality. So for example, if we have one male native speaker, maybe we should consider, okay, the first time and next time, anyway, one person should be women. Or, that kind of, the positive action is necessary. But actually, it's very difficult. I know it's a kind of idea, but it's very difficult to persuade male teachers, male professors in Japanese university, because Japanese university is very male-dominant society. Yeah, and yeah, that's all. I think. And also, I don't know. It is related to your question, but I support the creating a woman-friendly workplace, even in a university, because if women have a 10 years position or part-time position, and who has children, or and try to work family and workplace, they need child care center, or something like that, in university. And some university provided the child care center. So, we should create many ways, to, provide the woman-friendly atmosphere. Yeah. So it's a small step, but it is supporting, for female teachers.
Reiko, to follow up on one point that you said there, do you know if there are any guidelines or rules for having women on hiring committees, so that, women, we hear that like hire like, right? Are there any kind of official guidelines like that in Japanese universities?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, unfortunately, it's a kind of, how can we say, university effort we call 大学の努力. Yeah, it's how can I translate 努力? So how can we say service? Yeah, 大学の努力. That means we try to achieve 10% of women in a university, or 20% of the university. But it's try. There is no punishment if we break the rule or break the promise, So, yeah.
Can I add to that? Because one of the great things about actually being the head of the department is I'm automatically on hiring committees, and so that's been great to be able to try to make that happen. And my first experience with actually preparing for the hiring committee and looking at all the applications, I was really shocked that it was me and 4 or 5 male colleagues. And initially, they just went through, we went through all of the different packages, and they picked all male. And, they seemed like qualified people, but they were also qualified females. And I'm like, okay, let's add these 3. and make sure that they get interviewed, because right now in the English center, it was 7 men and 2 women that were teaching there. I said, you know, like we have an opportunity here to be able to increase the balance. And they said, okay, grudgingly, it was like, all right, let's throw them in. And the top 2 applicants were both female, and one of the women got the job. So I think it is like looks for like, you know, people tend to look for applications that look like them. So naturally, that you need to have a diversity on the committee in order to make sure there's diversity in the applicants as well. Yeah.
That was an excellent conversation to be able to listen into, and thank you all for taking the time to be with us tonight. My question pertains to this earlier point of intersectionality and the way that these personal narratives intersect with those that the universities are setting forth as being these sites of global interaction and a space for expanding relationships across borders. I've wondered in the past about the sort of industry of the JET program, for example, that sort of bring in these fresh-faced young educators and then cycle them out almost like clockwork on this predetermined schedule that you've all referred to in terms of 5-year increments here, but in other increments as well. And I wonder about these narratives of personally leaving and being apart from one's home country, and to what extent you felt that you're able to speak for or represent an international presence on your campus when your very national identity itself is maybe in question as someone who lives away or who has been away for a protracted period of time. I'm just curious about how that sort of issue of identity comes into your own teaching, or the demands that are made on you as an educator to sort of speak for an unseen or unheard presence. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for that question, because I think it's very interesting that when you think about intersectionality, you're thinking about partly us and our jobs, and that we're supposed to be representative of our country, and how this push for internationalization in Japan is sometimes just like the lip service, right? Like, well, you know, I am from Canada, but I have 2 other nationalities too, and I try very much to show that in class, that it is possible to be a multilingual person. You don't have to be perfect in all your languages, but you can be functional. You can have 3 citizenships and belong to 3 countries. I think that this is a very important role to play in Japan, and I don't want to be pigeonholed into being seen as just Canadian. It is an important part. But I can't say that I feel really connected to Japan. And I have worked in other places. I feel very connected in the sense that I've lived here for a long time. But I've also, I hope I'm not hurting anybody's feelings, I really have felt, in some cases, very much embraced by the society, but also very much rejected by the society. And I look at colleagues who are married to Japanese spouses, and I think they have half a chance of kind of fitting in some of the time. But because my husband is from another country, I feel most of the time that people just don't know what to make of you. Like, why would you, from this country, and your husband from another, choose to live here and raise your kids here? They just can't figure it out, so they just don't ask, right? So I wish they would a bit more. That's what I can say to speak to your question. But
Yeah, that's got me thinking. Like Jennifer, I've lived in a couple of countries as well, and I feel very strongly Canadian. I also feel very attached to Japan. I used to struggle a lot with the sense of what is home, and for some reason I felt I had to have one, and so it was always, what's home, what's home? And I've decided that home is the place where I'm not. And so in the summer, I'm going home. But then at the end of the vacation, I'm coming home. And so oddly, home is usually the other one. But I think maybe what I would hope that I'm able to offer to the students on campus is just the sense that you're not confined by national borders. And I'm always telling my students, even if you don't study abroad, just go abroad. You know, I don't even care if you're going for credits or anything, just travel, travel, travel. Go and see the world, because it's the best education they'll get. So I think maybe we're able to at least offer them just an example of how it can change the course of your life and open up different ways of seeing the world. Yeah. JET program, I never expected. So many of us, I think you come for a year. I'm one of those people. I'm going to Japan for a year. It's been 18 now. And with 2 breaks out, I did leave, but I keep coming back. But I do think that a lot of us don't plan to be here, but then, yeah, stay. So hopefully we're a good example for the students, because I think more of them need to go abroad. And as many of our countries, I think that students are feeling more and more insular and not leaving. And I think right now the world needs to have young people going and experiencing different cultures so that they can make better decisions than the generations before them. So thank you for your question.
Yeah. As for the JET program, I don't have specific data today, but I heard over 200 native speakers are coming to Japan for the JET. Way more? Okay.
Thousands each year.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how many Japanese teachers are sent to United States or Britain or Australia or other countries? And it's very important to educate teachers as an international person, but that we always invited the native speakers from foreign countries, but we don't send the teachers, English teachers, to different countries. And how can we be internationalized? Yeah, that kind of that I have a big question about the program. Yeah.
Just add a little bit to that too. I would think that many of us who teach in these international programs don't see ourselves as representatives of our home or our country of our birth at all. We see ourselves as educating our students to become global citizens, and we are global citizens because we've all lived and taught in different places. So I think as a JET, you're supposed to teach about your home country, and you're young. You've not. Japan might be your first place that you've lived overseas, but by the time you reach our ages, you've been everywhere. And we see our job as teaching our students about the world. Yeah. Okay.
Good evening. My name's Maria Guajardo, and I'm also at Soka University, and I'm also one of those rare birds that's tenured and has an administrative position. I want a comment and a question. The comment is, I really appreciate the conversation or the focus on intersectionality. How do these factors, whether it's your gender or your place of birth, how does that make a difference? And that other complicated layer is, as a woman of color, how does one experience life in Japan? And that's another layer. Microaggressions, discrimination, yeah, it's complex, but I think it's really important for us to not glump us all together. And I appreciated that you differentiated that, yes, there is a different experience, because as a woman of color, as a Latina, definitely my experience has been shaped and defined by that identity. So that's my comment. And then my question is, I'm very interested in better understanding leadership development for us as women in this country, in higher education. And you touched a little on this concept in your presentations, but I'd love to hear your perspective on what's needed in terms of women's leadership development in order for us to be able to advance. Thank you.
Okay. So I'd just like to acknowledge what you said, and that I have spoken to women of color, and take my hats off to you, because if we think that we've had a tough road, I've heard a lot of stories. As for women's leadership development, not only does the literature show that mentorship is crucial, mentorship programs are crucial. A lot of women in this room are my accidental mentors, right? Because I've been in professional development programs, but they're all kind of neoliberally based. Pushing, 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 do the research, publish, present, go, 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 never reflect. Never have a real relationship with one or two people that you really work closely with as a chance to actually develop skills. I think what's not realized here is that we never reflect on what we're doing and how to develop. We don't have the time. So how about, I read in the literature one professor emeritus saying, if I had to be a professor now, I would have never made the discoveries that I did because I had the privilege of focusing on one thing my entire career. I don't have the privilege of focusing on one thing for a minute in my career. We need time, and we need really experienced people above us to tell us what to do, to tell us how to play the game. Because I feel like I've been shooting from the hip for the last 15 years and piecing things together because there's nobody to really guide me, no formal thing. Now, mentorship programs have been proven to be successful, but you don't just have to set them up. You need feedback. You need to match people. You need to make sure that when they're matched, it's working, and if it's not, to fix it, and if it can't be fixed, to switch the mentor. We need mentorship. I would say that's definitely the key thing.
Okay. Okay. My suggestion: send a woman to the higher position in the university. So university should hire the university should put the women in a higher position. I mean, for example, gakkacho. I mean, how do you say gakkacho? Head of the department, or gakubucho, the head of the division, or gakcho, head of the university. Send the women in a higher position. That's very important, And then also, according to Japanese old saying, position makes a person. So that means, that sometimes, that we have still stereotypes, that women wouldn't be suitable as a higher positioned person, executive or president, But, on the other hand, we have a old saying, position makes a person. And so, that even though some people, assume that, some, stereotyped person assumes that, that women wouldn't be suitable, but, we don't give the position to women. So who knows, so send the women to the higher position, I strongly encourage the women to go to the higher position. And sometimes, I just, this is a new project I started, and I interviewed the 10 years women's faculty, and I asked them, do you want to get a higher position in a university? And many women said no, they don't want to go to the higher position. But, they didn't experience, they haven't experienced yet, so if they have experienced, they might like it. So, but also, there are, many ways to empower and encourage women, women's faculty, so, today I talked about non-tenured women. So, for example, providing a research budget, even though it is small, we should give a research budget to part-time instructors too, And also reconsider the teaching classes. As I said, we often ask the part-time teachers to teach repeaters class, and this is very discouraging, so we should reconsider the teaching classes, And also Jennifer said, the mentoring program, I mean, in Japan, it's not very popular. I mean, I haven't heard the mentoring program in Japanese university, but, you know, a mentoring program is very important, I think. Yeah.
So can I just add one point to what you said? You know, in leadership, and Maria's question is really about leadership, I think a lot of women say, no, I wouldn't want that because they don't see themselves as leaders. We don't have models, right? And, you know, there are lots of leadership theories. And one leadership theory that I've found really helpful is distributed leadership, where you don't have to have a formal title. You can be a leader even when you're a part-timer in a contingent position. You got to find your niche and lead. Just be a leader, right? And find the things that you're really strong at and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Like the women in my study, they made their own positions up. Right? They don't have to be given a title, although I agree with you. Having that title is really nice and it's confidence building. You don't really have to wait till someone gives it to you, though. You can make it. That's a possibility.
Yeah, adding on to that, I would say that I think we, especially in a position of leadership, so now as head of department, I want to encourage those women who are perhaps not confident that they should be in leadership roles, that they'd be good at it. Because I think a lot of people, they might not know that they'd like it, and the problem is I don't like it. Like I love teaching and research. I hate administration, and I'm on video, but it's true. I just really don't like to have to do those decisions. But I think I definitely want to have opportunities to lead, and I think that there's a lot of women who probably don't see themselves naturally as leaders. That we should bolster their confidence, give them the confidence to do it. Which would be great if we had quotas. Like I actually am a big fan of quotas. I would like to see quotas that we need to have this many women in leadership positions at universities, or else we're not going to reach targets. But so in my own experience, I think probably ways I've done this has been more like informal, subversive ways of working together with women that I know are doing good things, and we just do it in our own time. And I'm glad I had some time to reflect, because if people here don't know this group, FEAS, F-E-A-S, FEAS, F-E-A-S, Feminist Educators Against Sexism. And it was started in Australia, and there's a webpage, there is a Facebook group, and they're doing awesome work over there with doing interventions at conferences to make sure that more women are on panels, that they're being asked good questions, that they're having a voice. There's a monthly, what's the word? There's a listserv that goes out monthly with just the members' research. So everybody is welcome to just share, and not just English. Anybody who's publishing their work, feminist work, it's available there, and there's a giant collection of it, because one of the reasons I think that women don't get recognized to be in positions of authority and leadership is maybe because they're not seen as doing the work that is assumed to be done by men, but that's because we're not citing the women that we know who are doing good research. So we need to be very reflexive about who are we quoting, who are we citing? Make sure that your bibliography is filled with good women's work, and yeah, hopefully all of that will contribute to more women in leadership. Thank you.
To pick up on the point that you said about not liking administration, and Reiko said women she's spoken to said they wouldn't want a leadership position. Do you think that some women feel more freedom to actually say, no, I don't want to do that, and just do the aspects of their job that they want to do, more than men who feel as though they have to provide for their families, and this is have to go up the career ladder and do this? Do you think there's more sort of flexibility? I don't know.
My experience with leadership is that you have to go to meetings, you have to fill out papers, and you have to just sit in rooms a lot. Yeah. Drives me crazy. I just don't feel like I'm being productive. I don't feel that my experience is being utilized. I just organized an international conference. It was awesome. I want to be doing things where I'm able to lead using the skills that I offer uniquely to the institution. And so if leadership in administration I don't like, but leadership I love.
Actually, the woman, I interviewed just 2 or 3 weeks ago, said the same thing.
Yeah.
She wanted, she didn't want to be in a higher position because she wanted to spend her time for research and teaching, but from my experience, I was a kind of, the executive board member last year, and it was rewarding. It was very rewarding because I was able to make a direct comment to the top people, and I feel that I can change the university, or I can change the department, so it's very, good experience, so I want many women to get that kind of experience. Just don't refuse it, because if you have a chance, just get a job, the position, and you can change, So I really wanted to encourage you. Yeah.
Good evening. I have 2 questions. The first one is you said that the university system is male-dominated in Japan. So I was wondering, when you have a tenure, finally, do you still face discrimination because of gender? That's my first question. And because you also said that the position is the person is becoming the position. So once you have a tenure, are you considered equal to your man colleague? My second question is, Yoshihara-san, you said that the culture here in Japan is basically saying the man is the provider and the woman can have a part-time job. And I have some friends who are in that situation, and their part-time job is often considered by their family as a kind of distraction, just for them to, as a kind of a hobby, even if they are writing in a very prestigious, because I'm a journalist, a prestigious newspaper. So I was wondering, is this culture trait, does it evaluate, does it change, and was it measured in any way? Was it measured by a scientist or academics?
Okay, so at first, there is no obvious and clear discrimination. Every kind of, I said it's a male-dominant society, and now, the male professors said, oh, you are a woman, so you don't come to my room, or they don't say that. They are more, that they are. It's not like that, but. As I said, the discrimination is not the top-down fashion. It's more micro-level situation. How can I explain?
Doing pastoral care, who is expected to do emotional labor, that kind of stuff. Who is taking care that there's group harmony. And making time to be with the students, that's stuff that you're not rewarded. You're not going to get your promotion or your tenure based on caring for students and making sure that department meetings go smoothly, but that work is expected from female faculty.
And also, the number of, the ratio of male teachers and female teachers is a huge difference, So sometimes, when I go to the meeting, I'm the only one woman in the meeting, and no one said something, no one said, discriminatory word or whatever, but I feel very pressure because I'm the only one woman in this room, so I feel very, very pressure, and I think every woman have that kind of experience, So that's, very male-dominant, the society, I think, yeah. And I'm sorry, what's the second question? I'm sorry.
The second question was, it change, and was it measured? If it's changing, was it measured in any way?
Can I, well, okay, this is sort of connected, but I don't feel like anyone is treating me differently because of my gender, but I think that there are things in sort of a heteronormative framework that penalize me as a single woman. So for example, my colleagues who are married are offered free housing on campus. I don't. Yes, thank you for the puzzled look. So they're like, well, colleague A is moving to Japan, has a wife, let's give them free family housing. And I'm like, hello, I have the only income, give me free housing. And they're like, no, singles don't get it. So it's not a gender thing, but I think it's all part of gender expectations. And because I didn't follow the proper path and got married, then I'm not given the same benefits that would have made life simpler. So yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
So if I could just speak to your first question, which was about, once you've achieved a certain position, do you feel there's equality? I would have to say no. I mean, not that I've achieved tenure yet, but I look at my tenured female colleagues and I do think that they are expected to do more pastoral care. They're not spoken to the same way in meetings. Their contributions in meetings are not the same. I actually heard one of my female colleagues be told, who are you to tell the students what to do in the classroom? Who are you to suggest what they should read? They should choose it themselves. This is to a woman who's an Ivy League educated multi-millionaire with her own company on the side, being asked by a colleague, who are you? She's the Ivy League multi-millionaire, isn't it? Right? So it is kind of shocking to me sometimes when I see these women that are in formal positions being treated in ways that I just couldn't imagine somebody asking a man that was in that position the same thing, who are you, right? And as for, the provider and the measurements, listen, we say that this is particular to Japan and Japanese culture. I don't think so. I just came back from a summer in Canada, and I ran into a boy that I went to primary school with. And he asked me what I did, and when I told him, he said, not congratulations, but, oh, so you have to work? My wife doesn't have to work. Yeah, so it's not just here. It's really not just here. And I don't know how that can be measured, but I measured it in that comment. I measured it in that comment, and I realized that I always think that my home country, one of my home countries, is pretty progressive. Not so. Not so. And when I ran into another friend, he told me about this high-tech company that he'd started. I was interested. I Googled him. 23 employees, all male. One female in the room, tall, slim, blonde secretary. That's Canada, right? That's Canada. So how do you measure those things? How do you measure those attitudes? Should I be working? My husband, if I work so hard and take this long commute and fight to get this position, it must mean that my husband doesn't have anything. My poor kids, right? That's the attitude that I felt. That's all.
Hello. I really appreciate this dialogue. I think it's so important to have, and I've really been involved in the faculty development, professional development in my own university, so it's really fantastic. I'm really enjoying it. One comment and one question. The comment is, so my own background is I've taken a couple of fixed-term positions before I was lucky to get my tenure position. But after I got my tenure, as part of the university service, we get put on hiring committees, and often I get put on hiring committees for a variety of things. But what's interesting about that, I feel, is that, and I'm so surprised about it, to be honest, is that it's so haphazard. The hiring is so haphazard, meaning that the hiring committee is always some random group of people that get put on this committee. They don't really know what they're doing. There's no real manual for anything. There's no real understanding of compliance for what needs to be done. And they just kind of have this understanding about what happened to them. And so it's this kind of personal memory that they're basing their hiring upon. And so I really find that quite troubling. And I feel like, as Kristie just said, I think it's so important that there's a good representation, a diverse representation amongst that hiring committee. I don't know what kind of power we have to change that, except for maybe the department chair or somebody else who's got that power to nominate. And the other thing I wanted to say was that the haphazard nature is also in, I think, especially with tenured positions, it's so specific what they're looking for sometimes. So they might be saying that we're looking for a literature position, but it's really specifically a 20th century British literature person that they're looking for. So no matter how fantastic you are on paper, if you're not that person, then it automatically excludes you. And I think they just need to be a bit more clear and transparent in their job announcements for them. Anyway. My question was about the number of tenure positions that are available in Japan, especially for international faculty. And the reason why I ask this is because, as far as I know, and my knowledge is limited about this, the international faculty tend to be hired for particular positions that are marked for foreigners. And you mentioned that there were 5% tenured international faculty in Japan, right? So I wanted to find out whether there was any kind of growing trend in positions marked for tenured international faculty in Japan. And if those numbers are not increasing, then that means that it's stuck as a system. But I wonder, with all this kind of globalization, super global stuff happening, there's money being funneled into these projects, and I know that most of them are fixed-term contracts that become available for international faculty, but whether there are any increase in tenured positions for international faculty, and whether, and if that's not happening, then international faculty then need to start taking up the domestic faculty tenure positions, which they should. And I think the only thing that I would really echo, Kristie, is that the Japanese language, I hate to say this as a Japanese person, but it's about taking on the same kind of tasks and responsibilities that the other people are taking on. So if I could offer any kind of advice, it would be just to try to learn the Japanese. I really hate saying this, honestly, but I think that's the quickest way to get a tenure position. Anyway, so that was the question, the number of tenured faculty positions.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question. As far as I read, what I found for the chapter, no, the number of tenured positions for everybody is going down. So not just international, but in Japan, the number of tenured positions is going down. So I think there's a big shift everywhere to cut, just cut everything. Basically, if you can cut it, they'll cut it. And try to have just more temporary positions, especially the international faculty coming over tend to be on the fixed terms. I worked at a place where there's a lot of international programs, and they were losing, because they didn't have renewable contracts for their international faculty, they were having programs for international students where there were not enough credits for them to graduate because the courses had to be done in English, and they had lost all the international faculty because they were not able to tenure people. So it was creating the situation where the students were actually having the fallout because they couldn't complete their degrees because they weren't able to guarantee that there were the faculty there to deliver the classes. So the problem is, though, as well, that as I was researching this, I was seeing that this is everywhere. You know, I have a friend in Canada who just graduated with her PhD, was so demoralized by the time she finished her defense that she took a job at Staples part-time to just work as a clerk because she just couldn't even bear to try to interview for an academic position. And I just think that there are so many, the move for universities to think of themselves as, you know, serving customers rather than educating students. I think that the way the budget is being spent is making it harder and harder for any security to be offered to any nationality. And I don't, it's clearly, I'm sure all of us agree, it's not good for the universities because the programs are going to suffer if they, you know, we need to have some senior faculty who are going to be mentoring and training the junior faculty. And I think that all the senior faculty are going to retire and not be replaced because they can't afford to hire new full-time faculty, and everything is then run by part-timers. So it's a big problem, yeah.
I want to add to that my research centres on internationalisation rather than gender, and it's my understanding that those jobs that we hear in the policy speeches, the sort of we have to hire this many more foreign faculty, and under the umbrella term of foreign faculty, they also count Japanese who have graduated from overseas. And so anecdotally, just from my own sort of browsing job openings daily, basically, over the last, I would say, 3 years or so, we're seeing a shift in the job advertising that say, you know, whereas when, for example, English taught programs were starting to grow in 2010, it seemed like we were going to have to hire more foreign faculty to teach all of these classes in English. And over the last 3 years, I've seen a big increase in the number of job advertisements that say teach in English and must also be able to teach in Japanese. And those jobs are really going towards Japanese who've been educated overseas. And I think in the hiring committee's mind, that, you know, thing that they don't say, that's who they're looking for. Great, I've got lots of Japanese friends who are looking for those jobs who have struggled in the past, so it's great. But I feel that those faculty members are less kind of scary. They're not going to leave. I feel that idea of the foreigner is going to leave is still in hiring committees' heads. And so the Japanese who's got the foreign PhD is a much safer option. And I feel as though those jobs are going to those people these days. But haven't seen hard evidence. Would be nice to know the numbers.
Hi. Thank you so much for a really fascinating evening. And I'm not an academic, so I'm going to ask slightly maybe different kinds of questions. I have two quick questions. One is whether any of you do any creative writing as a way of communicating your personal stories and feelings, and in a sort of more open way, and also whether you feel that in today's world, encouraging students, male or female, to aim for a career in academia is a good idea, or are we really heading for a world where improvisation, creativity, completely different skills are needed, and maybe investing huge amounts of money in a sort of academic track is no longer the right choice for students? This is a question that comes to me for my nephews, etc. Thank you.
So, as to the first question about creative writing, I do. And most of it is journal work, imagination and things like this, like kind of a private journal in my desk. But I found that to be really invaluable because academic writing for me is quite dry, even though I try to do narrative work, so it's storytelling, right? But some kind of creative outlet is really necessary in such a, well, I wouldn't say the academic environment is dry. I mean, in my classes, I don't feel that it is. But what, like the day-to-day grunt work that I do of prep and feedback and meetings, it's really dry. And you lose a kind of spark if you don't have some kind of creative outlet. And I think that's very important for our students too. In these EMI programs, English Medium of Instruction programs, we're always pushing our students to academic writing. Like, to get them to be able to get there, they need to have some kind of writing fluency, and a lot of that comes from storytelling or keeping a journal or things like that. About your second question, aiming for academia, I think about my boys. I have 2 boys, and they're not academically oriented, so they don't really even fit into the school system. And I think that, you're talking about your nephews and what you should recommend to them. I think that growing up as a Generation Xer, we were pushed to go to university. It's still said constantly, as the price of education rises, especially in the States, that investment is worth it, because statistically, if you're a graduate, you'll get a higher pay than somebody who's not a graduate. But as a teacher, I find it indefensible how expensive education is. And I find it indefensible that we're packaging a product to students. And this neoliberal agenda goes much, much deeper than just affecting our work lives. It affects the people that we are responsible for, their pastoral care. We're running them into debt, right? So no, don't make a choice. You're treated like a consumer, make a consumer choice. If you are not an academic, don't go to university, because there are other opportunities and there are other ways to learn. And there's an unschooling movement now in the US that I feel like I'd like to talk about that with my students. Is it worth driving yourself into debt to come here? What do you really, because now we have put a price on education. That's very unfortunate, I think.
Yeah, thanks for your question. I said in the beginning, I come from a theater background, and I miss it desperately. I miss being in a creative space with other people and doing project-based work. Writing is painful for me, terribly, terribly painful for me. I do it a lot, but I don't enjoy it. But I'm proud when I'm done, so I'll continue to do it. The times, like Jennifer, a couple of years ago, I almost left academia. Like, I was actually looking at spaces in Scuba to open a sort of event space, international gathering event, all lessons and movies and everything. It was going to be this space where you could do everything that I wanted to do. And sometimes I think it's sad that didn't end up being the path I took. Yeah, someday I may go into floristry. I have ikebana is my love. But yeah, I think that it's a shame that we're not getting the same sense of creative, just intellectual creativity, and students wanting to follow something they're excited about. That was my experience. I was at a small liberal arts campus, and I just think it's tragic that liberal arts is becoming, extinct these days, because I think that actually is what society needs, to have people who are more creative and thinkers. But yet again, it just seems that with this model these days, that universities are serving customers, and customers get big bills. It's hard not to get kind of discouraged sometimes. But I was talking before this event, we were having a little gathering beforehand with the panel, and I was talking about my summer cottage in Prince Edward Island. And in PEI, if you are a plumber or a carpenter, you are going to make way more money than if you get your PhD and are looking for jobs. So I think going into the trades in Canada anyway, it's going to be a guaranteed lucrative job. And we as educators, especially in pre-university, I think do a disservice to students by telling them they have to go to university when there's so many different avenues. Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, so as for creative writing, yeah, I do the research journal, for myself, whenever I interviewed someone, how I felt or, what we talked, that I wrote, and but interestingly, since I got a EDD, I mean doctoral degree in American University, I have written a research paper in English, so I haven't written the research paper in Japanese. Oh, really? So I don't know how to, sometimes, I'm Japanese, so I perfectly speak Japanese and I write the perfect Japanese, but as for research, I don't know what kind of words I should use in Japanese, So my, research journal is always code mixing. I write English and then, I put some Japanese in it, so it's, I don't want to show it, so, but anyway, yeah, that's kind of my research journal, and I would say creative writing, And as for the, the education, Bourdieu said, education is supposed to produce human capital, which is supposed to make people more employable. But it's not, yeah. And yeah, actually, one of my students asked me, he was thinking to go to graduate school, and he asked me, what do you think? Is it good to go to graduate school? And I got a 10 years position, so I'm very happy about that. And, so for me, it was a great experience in a graduate school, and master's degree and PhD, doctoral degree, and spending time in the United States. It was a great, great experience. But if I were part-time teacher, can I say the same thing to him? So I don't know. To go to graduate school or to go to doctoral degree, as Jennifer said, it costs a lot. It costs a lot. So I don't know it is a good decision or not. So actually I asked him, are you from rich family? Yeah, I honestly asked him, your parents support you, the financially, and actually he said, yeah, my parents support me, for graduation, wow. Tuition or, or spending money, so, okay, so it might be okay to go to graduate school, yeah. But otherwise, I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that kind of question, yeah.
Can I just add one more thing that I thought about while we were talking? There's a woman called Christine Ortiz in Massachusetts, a woman of color, she was the dean of the Faculty of Materials Engineering at MIT until last year. And she just got, sick of the rigmarole that we're talking about and the tenure and the students coming in and out and the whole neoliberal agenda. And she started her own university called Station One. And Station One is, there's no degrees, there's no bachelor's and master's, there's none of that. It's all project-based work with specialists that come in on a voluntary basis from all over the world. And it's free for people that need it. Now, if we think that we can't do anything and we're stuck against this neoliberal wall, I look at that example, that Christine Ortiz, look her up. She is a shining light in this whole neoliberal cesspit, and possibilities are there for change. create your own leadership opportunities. Don't be the dean at MIT. Start station 1, right? Right? Yeah.
That's why I think if we've got no more questions, then let's end it there and all quickly go to our phones to Google this lady and find out about the work that she's doing, because it does sound very, very interesting, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for a great discussion this evening. I'm happy to see so many people here and so many people engaged in discussions of women in academia. And let's give a big round of applause to our speakers today.